Contrary to popular belief, you're not meant to kill your ego, you're meant to tame it so you can use it as a tool to reach your highest potential. I recommend you to take a lot of notes in this video because I'm going to teach you the 3 steps towards dominating your ego and using it to become your best self, which is what I'm going to teach you today. But first, let me teach you what truly is the ego. The principle of gender stated in Hermeticism is one of the universal laws that create this entire reality. And it states that this reality, including you and down to the atoms, everything in order to come into creation is made up of masculine and feminine energy. But the feminine energy is the dream, the idea, the initial impulse of energy, right? And the masculine is the one that takes that impulse of energy, takes that dream and orders it, gives it an order, and codes it into the existence. So think of the feminine energy as like the impulse of energy of the Big Bang, right? And the masculine energy giving all these particles, all these things in order so they can come into fruition and create the world that we see today. But you are also made up of masculine and feminine energy, not only your particles, your atoms, everything. Your whole existence is made up of these two. So the masculine energy, once again, is the order, it is the coder, it is the self, right? The external world, it is the ego, which is what we're gonna get into. And the feminine is the internal world, the heart, while the masculine is the mind, right? It is the empathy, the bridge to the mystical. And this is also compassion, right? Compassion for others. This is the love for others, and the masculine is the love for the self. And these two make up who you are. Now, as I mentioned, the masculine right here, what we're going to talk about today strictly is going to be identity, okay? Which is actually what the ego is. A lot of people think the ego is like this part of yourself that is bad and it tells you all these bad things. And yes, that is one part of it. That is the darkness of the ego. But the ego, when it is in this light, it is the identity, right? It's the self. It is literally what differentiates you from another person. If you didn't have an ego, you would literally not be able to tell me apart from you. If you were to feed yourself, you wouldn't know where to put the spoon because you literally are one with everything. You would most likely be in a vegetable state. So you need the ego in order to give you that order and be here in this entire existence and be able to live your individual expression of God, right? To its fullest potential. That is really why your identity is here, right? Because otherwise, if everything was one, there would be no learning. You need to be an individual expression of God so you can learn the most that you possibly can from that specific identity. Now I want to talk to you how we walk 2 planes. I'm gonna make a prism. Have you guys ever heard of Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon? Well, I'm talking about a prism that looks like that. So let's talk about the prisms, right? When light reflects on a prism, we see the 7 color spectrum, right? Red, yellow, orange, etc. reflected off of the prism because light goes into it and then it refracts into all these different, into what we can see with our visible eye, basically. And so what we want to think of, right here, is that light, God, right, the oneness, love, goes into the prism. And this light, this oneness, which is God really, goes into this prism. What is the prism? Can you guess? Maybe put it down below. The prism is the mind, okay? And I don't want you to think the mind is the brain. The brain is not the mind, okay? The mind goes way beyond our physical senses, way beyond this physical plane. There's a whole mental plane, and that is exactly what is creating this entire reality. So the mind, you have oneness going into the mind, and then it refracts into separation, okay? It refracts into the illusion of this reality. And you have right here this reality. And it is perceived through duality, okay? So this is why we have the dual plane here, masculine and feminine energy. But we also perceive it through our ego, through our identity. If we didn't have identity, we would be on this side. So we actually live on this side, okay? We live here in this oneness. And we perceive this plane, perceive this. We perceive the dual plane. We perceive it through our ego, through our identity. And this is where I'm trying to get at. It's really important because the point is not to dissolve the ego because you would dissolve the illusion. It is the illusion of separation. Remember that. We're going to get into that right now. But it is the illusion of separation, right? Because we're really here. We're really on this side. But if we were to completely embrace this side and forget about this one in this physical experience, there's absolutely no lessons. We came here to not let the illusion control us. That is what the ultimate learning experience is. Understanding that this right here is an illusion, okay, of separation. And that's an illusion of separation. We're not meant to break it, we're meant to learn how to control it, and we're meant to work with it as well to have its best lessons. And so this illusion of separation is basically the ego, and that's how we perceive absolutely everything. No, your ego doesn't create reality, your mind does, but your ego helps you perceive reality. So it's really a tool. And if your ego can be in sync with your intention, right? If your ego can be in sync with your intention, that's when it becomes a tool, because at the end of the day, well, it's your identity, right? It's your identity, and your identity is made up of beliefs, and your beliefs create reality. So when you learn to use the ego, that's when you can truly take advantage of the tool that it is. And it has two sides. The problem resides when the ego dominates the person instead of the person dominating the ego and using it as a tool to pretty much evolve. Step number one is understanding what the ego is really telling you. First, let's understand the two faces of the ego. Just like how we have a shadow self and everything works, as within, so without, the dual realm, the ego does have a light and a dark side. And both are extremely needed. The thing, like I just mentioned, is that most people actually do mainly have their ego on this side right here, on the darkness. And when I say the light, I don't mean when the ego literally, boosts your ego, right? Telling you, oh my God, you're better than that person, or oh, that person's just jealous of you, etc. That's also not what I'm saying, because that's pride, and that does reside in the lower half of the scale. Let me put the vibrational scale right here so you can look at it. As you can see, the bottom half of the scale is something that can only be felt through the mind. Why do I say that? Because the only reason you can ever have fear is if you are living from a separation belief, okay? Because the ego is the illusion of separation. The mind alone, right? The mind, the masculine alone, is not connected to the heart. And you need the heart in order to feel these higher vibrational emotions and overall higher vibrations, right? So overall, you need to understand that when the ego is telling you to vibrate lower, right? For this example, I use, oh, you're jealous, like that person's jealous of me. That's pride. That's still in this lower half of the scale, okay? So it's not coming from a place of the heart, the oneness, the feminine energy, right? It is coming from the mind fully, right? It's disconnected from the heart. So that tempts it to vibrate lower. Yes, the feminine energy can also vibrate lower, but that's a whole other video. That would be the extreme of the feminine. Once again, other video. So the dark side of the ego tempts you. That's its whole mission. And you need it, okay? And it's a lifelong journey to pretty much tame it completely. Even the Buddhas to this day, right? Like those people that you see meditating their entire lives, really pursuing the spiritual path as their entire life, even they hold on to the ego, because there's quite a lot of lessons to be learned. And I promise you, to this day, their ego still has a dark side. We all need a a duality to our existence. Anyways, so the darkness tempts you, okay? It tempts you to vibrate lower. It always tells you, oh, you're not worthy of this. Oh, you can't do that. Oh, that person's gonna reject you. You might not even gonna accept it. You're not good enough. Or, oh, that person's jealous of you. Once again, right? The pride. You're better than everybody else, etc. It just tempts you to vibrate lower. It tempts you to hold on to the fear of separation. It tempts you to hold on to the illusion of separation, which is very imbalanced. It goes towards an extreme of a masculine, right? We want the feminine energy in all of us, okay? We want the feminine energy because the feminine energy is what connects us to the oneness. And the masculine energy uses the feminine energy in order to create this beautiful reality we have. Without your masculine energy, you wouldn't be able to take a dream and put it into reality, right? You wouldn't be able to take an idea and make it happen, which is, the light of the ego. The ability to balance your energies, your masculine and feminine energy. So the thing with the dark side of the ego is that it tempts you towards getting further away from oneness. So the healthy side of the ego is that your feminine energy, right, comes up with ideas, comes up with dreams, has compassion, etc. And then your masculine energy, your identity, uses that in order to put it into existence, right? So both of these energies work together towards creation, towards creating together. So why is the darkness so important? Good, you ask. When the ego tempts you to vibrate lower, that is where you can see what you need to work on in order to come more into alignment, which is this, okay? So the dark side, just like your shadow, right? Your shadow is always telling you, hey, this is something that we need to work on. These are some wounds that we need to heal in order to, you know, come more into alignment, come more into who you truly are, into your being. The ego in itself helps you do that as well. The ego has a dark side that tells you, that tempts you, that gives you temptations, that tempts you to vibrate lower, that tempts you to lose yourself. And when you start to look at it and to become aware of the ego throughout your life, you start to look at, you know, where you need to work. And your ego, we're going to talk about this in a little bit, it does lead you towards quite a lot of healing. So we're going to talk about that on step number 3. But when it comes to this, the ego is very important. So don't forget that it needs both of its faces. The points to have it more here though. Number 2 would be to recognize the toxic ego cycle. So now that we talked about the toxic side of the ego, the darkness, right? We realized that the ego, that side of it, is rooted in fear. And fear is something you could only have from the illusion of separation. If you were, you know, in alignment with yourself, you wouldn't have fear because you would be in the state of oneness. And the state of oneness, that is where the higher vibrations come from, right? From being connected with your heart. When you're connected with your heart, with your feminine energy, you're able to vibrate higher because that allows you to bring up your energy to connect with God, the universe, source, etc. And obviously fear is something that you don't really have there because fear only comes from the illusion of separation. Fear is something that you can only feel in this physical realm. That is the only place where you can feel fear. Because fear, yes, it's a lower vibration, right? It's only fear or love. And love is oneness, love is God, love is light, and all these other higher vibrations stem from that. But fear and all of its other vibrations, because there's only 2 emotions, fear has anger, sadness, grief, whatever, right? It has all these other lower vibrations. So remember, fear only comes from the illusion of separation because it is only felt in this physical realm. So how does this tie into this? Well, let's talk about the ego cycle. That is a terrible circle, but we're gonna have to work with that. So the first part of the ego cycle is the belief, the reason, right? Let's say that your ego, that part of yourself, right? Every single time you have fear towards something, you doubt yourself, you are prideful, whatever, all of that comes from the ego. So let's put a common example that I've seen quite a lot with my clients, where they work too much, right? And they feel like when they don't work, they're not valuable, right? They're not doing anything, they're just useless. They feel like they're wasting their time, okay? So let's use those examples because I have quite a lot of clients with that problem. So their belief is, if I don't work, I'm invaluable. For them, their pattern, which we're also gonna cover more in depth, is working too much, but you wanna tie it to your situation with me here, okay? So let's take out our notebooks, let's write down this literally just copy and paste the ego cycle onto your notebook and let's do it together, right? You could also be somebody who procrastinates. You really wanna get things done, you have this big dream, but every single time you sit down, you just can't do it, right? So your belief would be, I can't take action. That's the belief. In this case, it's if I don't work, I am not valuable. And there is a reason why that is happening, right? This is a belief, but there's something behind it. There is something behind this. So behind this belief, there is always fear. So you want to ask yourself after this fear is of what? What are you fearful of, right? What are you fearful of? So why do they work too much? Why, right? Why do you do that? And it's always to avoid pain, okay? You always do this, right? If you're procrastinating, it's because you're trying to avoid the pain. If you're going through any pattern, there's always a reason why you're doing it. If you can break down the fear, you will figure out there's always a why. Why are you so scared of this? Why? And right here, it is to avoid the pain. In this case, this person keeps working to avoid the pain of being unworthy, right? Which is the illusion that the ego has created for them. And to put it in another example, let's say you're procrastinating, right? There's a fear of what? Rejection. And why do you keep procrastinating is to avoid the pain of feeling rejection. So let's break it further. Now, in this case, this person's working too much, right? And it's leading them to this false compensation. Oh my God, I was so productive today, right? I did so many things. I got most of the things I had to do done. So they feel like they were productive. They feel like they were worthy, right? But that comes at an expense. So because in reality, this person right here keeps ignoring their life. they're only working in the external world, right? They're only doing, and they're not letting themselves relax. They're not nurturing their feminine. They're not nurturing they're not nurturing themselves. So this is really just like this false compensation, right? But this person doesn't hang out with their friends. This person doesn't have time to go out. If they do have time to go out, they feel like they're not doing enough. If they do have time to go out, they're drained, they're fatigued, they feel miserable now. They feel purposeless because they're ignoring a whole other side of themselves. So that was a false compensation that leads to the price to pay, which is exactly what I just told you. This person's unfulfilled, they work too much, and they reach a burnout, right? They get burnt out. So that's the price to pay. So another example, let's say you're procrastinating, right? You're not actually getting any work done. Then the false compensation is, okay, well, I'll do it tomorrow. I have a relief, right? I can just plan out some stuff, blah, 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 blah. But the price to pay is that you didn't do anything. You didn't do anything. You ended up not executing anything. And so this goes right back to feeling invaluable. Okay, the belief, the core belief, I am unworthy. The core belief, I will get rejected, right? The core belief, you end up feeling like this anyways. That's the illusion of the ego, okay? It takes you through this whole cycle with your whole pattern just to feel exactly what you were trying to avoid. That's the cycle, okay? So if you can right now tie it to your situation, that would be awesome, because once you understand the cycle of the ego and how it works for you, you can address it, right? You can start to address it. You can start to see when it manifests in your life. And obviously, this is the dark side of the ego. We're supposed to learn from this side. We're supposed to work with this side in order to see how can we come into alignment, right? If you obviously have a belief, a rooted belief that you are unworthy, well, there's things to work on there. There is a reason why you feel unworthy, and that takes, you have to do healing and work on that, which is gonna be step number 3. Before we go into step number 3, if you're finding this video helpful, make sure to like it and subscribe if you're truly looking to align with your highest potential through the supernatural power of your mind. And check out the different resources and ways to work with me below. Number 3 is recognize what your toxic ego really is. So as we have seen, the ego is what voices the illusion of separation, which is what creates fear, okay? It creates fear. But this idea or illusion of separation that it keeps voicing, where do you think it's coming from? Any guesses? The ego is voicing the fear of the inner child. How many of you guys got that right? So the ego is voicing the fear of the inner child. It is not the inner child itself, but it is the fear of the inner child. So it is really important to understand that if you work with your inner child, okay, you tame the ego more. How does that make sense, right? So you can see the toxic ego takes you through a cycle of patterns. When we went through that specific situation, right, the person working too much because they feel like they're unworthy if they don't work. I've been there myself, right? That's why I also use that situation. But definitely when it comes to that person, they felt unworthy. And that unworthiness is coming from somewhere. It is coming from your inner child. It all ties back into working with the ego as well. It's all connected. So it's almost like a kill 2 birds with 1 stone kind of thing. So the fear of the inner child, right? The more that you work on this fear, the work that you work on healing, right? You tame the ego more and it becomes something that eventually helps you. That side of the ego, as you can see, repeats these old programs, right? In that case, it was feeling unworthy, but it repeats these old programs in your life that are no longer you. And they're outdated as well. So when we start to listen to the ego, we start to notice that they're really just repeating these fears of the inner child that have not been worked on. So this is why it's really important to realize and become aware of your ego and what it is telling you, so you can understand what are those old programs, and then you can start to work on it with your inner child. So these old programs were inflicted in the first 7 years of your life, which is when your subconscious mind was created. And in the first 7 years of your life, what were you? A child. And remember that fear was learned in this physical realm as well. And emotions are energy in motion. They don't just go anywhere. They need to be processed, right? Which is something we didn't get to do. This is why you keep having that vibration in your subconscious mind that stayed. It wasn't properly processed when you first felt it, because when you were a kid, all of your emotions, by the way, come from the first 7 years of your life as well. When it comes to those first 7 years of your life, that's where all of your emotions, good and bad, came from, okay? And then those emotions kept repeating themselves throughout time. So yes, basically the people are repeating the first 7 years of their lives. So as we talked about, the ego gives you an opportunity to feel those emotions. If you really realize and observe the ego and you're like, okay, my ego is telling me that I'm not worthy and that I am not, I have to keep working. Why is it telling me that? Okay, well, because it doesn't want to feel unworthy, right? It has a fear of feeling unworthy because deep down that's the belief that it has. Okay, the best way to work in that moment with your inner child is allowing them to feel fear, right? And I know that sounds a little bit contradictory, but your inner child is the one that always has your emotions. Like all your emotions come from the inner child, good and bad. That's your inner child. So when you feel this feeling of unworthiness, right, and then you end up doing all these patterns, in this case working a lot, in that case you should allow your inner child to feel that fear, right? To feel that fear, because love is allowing yourself to feel emotions, good and bad, allowing yourself to embrace the human experience, so then you can also feel the emotion and let it go. You cannot let an emotion go unless you feel it, okay? Unless you process it correctly. And once again, check out the video on shadow work on how to properly work with your emotions in order to reprogram the subconscious mind and heal the inner child. But that's one of the things. You need to allow yourself to process your emotions. You need to allow yourself to feel validated as well, right? There is a reason why your inner child feels unworthy. You want to make them feel validated and not make them feel like they're crazy, right? Oh, you shouldn't be feeling this way, blah, 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 right? And after you have felt your emotions, allow yourself, to have some reason as well. Like tell yourself, hey, like everything's gonna be fine. I'm right here with you, etc. Like actually give yourself some reason. And after you feel your emotion, that's when you can become the authoritative parent. The person who comes and tells you, hey, it's okay to feel that way, but now I'm here with you. Let's do this together. You're the one that gives yourself value. There's people who are gonna reject you, and that's okay. Just keep being yourself. We're gonna do this together. You're safe with me. You're secure, and etc. Just become the authoritative parent, right? Like become that parental figure to yourself. That is really how you work with the inner child. The safer your inner child feels with you and the better they feel with you, the more your ego starts to be more tamed, basically. So basically, inner child healing, working with your inner child, consists of feeling emotions so you can process them and you can let those vibrations become more eased, right? You can start to lessen the vibrational impact those traumatic memories and those moments had in your subconscious mind, and then you can start to heal, literally start to close up the wounds. Plus, becoming your own parent, okay? Being there for yourself, nurturing yourself, giving yourself encouragement, allowing your inner child to have fun, allowing your inner child to be creative, right? Be the parent you needed when you were a child. That is how you build your inner child relationship. And one last one, which kind of has to do with this one, would be allow yourself to have fun. Your inner child is innovative, your inner child is creative, your inner child is spontaneous, curious, adventurous. Don't shut that off in you, okay? The more you allow yourself to let that side of you shine, the more your ego starts to become more mutable, because the fear of the inner child starts to lessen, because now the inner child feels like it can be itself with you. They feel safe with you. They feel like, they can process their emotions with you, etc. So this is really like the ingredients to the soup of the healing, basically. But yes, as you can see, the ego is not bad. It's just that many people misinterpret it. They don't understand what it's meant to do in our lives. It has many faces that are each meant to be used for a specific purpose. And once you learn to work with them, that's when your life completely transforms. Thank you so much for watching. Definitely save it because it's quite a lot of information that you're gonna want to go back to. Give it a like if it was helpful. And if you're looking to align with your highest potential through the metaphysical, don't forget to subscribe. I'm Ira Morphy, and I'll see you on the next video.